about the digestive system. So our objectives for this video lecture is that we are going to distinguish between mechanical and chemical digestion, and then as we walk our way through, or should I say be ingested, through the digestive system, you're going to be able to identify the parts of the digestive system as well as the enzymes associated with each part of the digestive tract. So digestion takes place in 4 stages. First, you've got ingestion, which is the intake of food. So you're eating a sandwich, an apple, pizza, anything like that. Then you've got digestion, which is the mechanical. So there's actually mechanical, physical breakdown, and chemical breakdown, so through hydrolysis of the food that you eat. Next, you have absorption, where your cells in the lining of your digestive tract, specifically the small intestine, get absorbed into the bloodstream and carted away to different areas of the body that need those nutrients. And then last but not least, we have elimination, where any sort of undigested materials, most often fiber, passes out of the digestive tract through the anus. So here is a diagram of the human digestive system. We start out with the mouth, and specifically inside the mouth we have or the oral cavity. So this is the mouth, right? We start out our digestive system with the mouth, the oral cavity, and within the oral cavity we have salivary glands, and those salivary glands produce an enzyme called amylase that ends up helping to break down carbohydrates. So carbohydrates get broken down in the mouth first, and then as you begin to chew your food, you mechanically start to break down your food through the chewing of your food. Then you create a bolus of food at the back of your mouth, and then you swallow, and that goes down to the next part of the digestive system, which is your esophagus. And the esophagus is just one long tube. Essentially, it's a highway from your mouth leading to your stomach. And the stomach is the next organ of the digestive system. So the first organ is the mouth, and the next organ is your stomach. In the stomach, your food, that bolus of food, will pass through the cardiac orifice and enter into the stomach. And that stomach has hydrochloric acid in it, as well as pepsin. And so your stomach will start to digest proteins here, and the hydrochloric acid will also assist in chemically breaking down the pepsin, as well as hydrochloric acid will start to chemically break down further that bolus of food. Within your stomach is a very muscular organ, and it will actually start to contract, and those contractions are called peristalsis, and those contractions aid in mechanical digestion of food. So we've got 2 forms of mechanical digestion. We've got the chewing of your food in your mouth, and we've got the peristalsis, or the muscle contractions of the stomach, that are grinding your food as well, with the aid of hydrochloric acid and pepsin, which are enzymes that are chemically breaking down your food as well. Once that food has been broken down, it becomes this thick, soupy liquid called chyme, and it will then pass out of your stomach in small amounts to your small intestine through the pyloric sphincter, and that chyme material will enter the first part of the small intestine. And you need to know the name of the first part of the small intestine. And the first part of the small intestine is called the duodenum. Okay, the duodenum is where the majority of digestion takes place. So the majority of digestion does not take place in the stomach. In fact, the only nutrient that is digested in the stomach is protein with the help of pepsin. That material chyme gets entered into the duodenum of the small intestine, and in the duodenum of the small intestine, we have the accessory organs here, the liver, the gall bladder, and the pancreas. They're called accessory organs because they're not part of the tube that makes up the digestive system, but they do aid in digestion. So the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas produce additional enzymes and additional material to help aid digestion even further and to continue digestion in the duodenum of the small intestine. So the majority of digestion of the nutrients that you consume takes place in the duodenum of the small intestine. Once we've moved past the duodenum of the small intestine, we get into the ileum and the jejunum of the small intestine, and that is where all the absorption of nutrients takes place. So the small intestine is roughly 20 feet long, and it's 20 feet long because it's designed to absorb as many nutrients as possible. So we want to have a really long tract there that will aid in us obtaining the maximum number of nutrients as possible. Once we've left the small intestine, we move into the large intestine, sometimes referred to as the colon. And the function of the large intestine is not digestion, but absorption of water. This is where any undigested food is going to pass through, and the job of the large intestine is to absorb as much water from that undigested food as possible, because, as you know, we're made up of about 55 to 60% of water, and we lose roughly 2 liters of water a day, so we don't want to lose any more water than necessary, so we try to extract as much water as possible from any undigested food. And then last but not least, that undigested food passes through the rectum and throughout our anus in the elimination step of digestion. So I'm going to go back to the mouth and we're going to walk through each part of the digestive system. So with the mouth, we have ingestion, and we start to begin the digestive process. So there are 2 types of digestion that take place in the mouth. We have mechanical digestion and we have chemical digestion. So mechanical digestion is your teeth. Your food is actually being chewed, it's being masticated, that's another word for chew, masticated to break it up into small pieces. Now, meanwhile in the mouth, there's also some chemical digestion going on as well. The enzyme amylase, we know it's an enzyme because it ends in the suffix ase. So anytime you see ase, you know you're going to be dealing with an enzyme. So saliva has the enzyme amylase in it, and it's designed to digest starches. And remember that starches are carbohydrates, so we start to digest carbohydrates right away. As soon as carbohydrates enter our mouth, our body has already started to break those carbohydrates down. We also produce mucin, which is just a slippery protein. That's your mucus. And it's designed to protect the soft lining of the digestive system, as well as lubricating our food in order to make it easier to swallow and continue down the digestive tract. There's also some natural buffers in our saliva as well in order to prevent any sort of tooth decay, so neutralizing any sort of acid. So if you think about like the Coke that you drink or orange juice, those have citric acid in it. And so there are buffers in order to neutralize that acid and prevent your teeth from rotting away so that you can actually help digestion by being able to mechanically break that stuff down. And there's also some antibacterial chemicals in your mouth that are designed to kill any bacteria that might enter along with your food. So like the 5-second rule, when you drop food and then you pick it up and put it in your mouth, there are actually chemicals in your saliva and in your mouth that aid in eliminating the bacteria, because there will be bacteria on your food. I don't care how long it's been on the floor, there will be bacteria on your food after you've dropped it, and so your body knows that it needs to, it has a way of preventing bacteria or any other harmful agents from entering your body and causing you any illness. So swallowing, not choking, we're talking about swallowing here. So once you are done chewing and chemically begun to digest your food or break down your food, something called a bolus, it's just a lump of food, is formed with the saliva and the tongue. And so there's your bolus of food up there, and you swallow. And a very important, I guess you would call it an organ or a flap of cartilage, I should say. The epiglottis is there in order to close your trachea. So it's a flap of cartilage that's designed to close off the trachea from this food, and the trachea is your windpipe when you're swallowing, so that your food goes down your esophagus and doesn't travel down your trachea to your lungs. So if you've ever had or experienced when food goes down the wrong hole or the wrong pipe, and then you start to cough and stuff like that, that's because you either swallowed too quickly and that epiglottis couldn't close in time, which is why you got food or water down your windpipe. How does your food or that bolus of food get down to the stomach? It gets down to the stomach by these involuntary muscle contractions called peristalsis. So peristalsis starts to occur in the esophagus as a way to move that bolus of food from your mouth on to your stomach. So once we've continued down the esophagus, we enter the stomach through the cardiac sphincter. And while you're in this esophagus, there is no digestion occurring. The esophagus's job is just to connect the mouth to the stomach. It's just a highway, just like there's a highway from here to Oakland, 580. It's just a route to go from point A to point B. Your esophagus is located behind your windpipe, so if you actually touch your throat, you're touching your windpipe. Your esophagus is actually behind that. And peristalsis, those muscle contractions, end up moving that bolus of food from your mouth down towards your stomach. And your esophagus is roughly about 1 foot in length. So once that bolus of food goes through the cardiac sphincter at the top of the stomach, it enters into, the larger portion of the stomach. So the stomach has a variety of different functions. It can store food. Doesn't store it for very long, but it can store food, and it can fit roughly 2 liters of food. So if you end up like chugging a 2-liter bottle of soda, your stomach can actually hold that. It can't hold anything more than that. You'd probably end up sick after that. Your stomach is also designed to disinfect food. So remember you dropping, a piece of food on the floor and picking it up and eating it anyway, maybe blowing it off. There is a chemical, hydrochloric acid, has about a pH of 2, and it's designed to kill any sort of bacteria that might be arriving in the stomach with the food that you consumed. There is both mechanical and chemical digestion going on. So peristalsis is those muscle contractions. So your stomach actually churns and the muscles start to contract. And so that's the mechanical digestion. And then specifically, there's an enzyme called pepsin. Doesn't have the ASE on the end, but it is an enzyme, and it's specifically designed to break down protein. So how do I remember that pepsin breaks down protein? Well, pepsin starts with P, and protein also starts with P. So that should help you on a test or a quiz to remember that pepsin is responsible for breaking down protein in the stomach. Once the food has been broken down both chemically and mechanically in the stomach, okay, it ends up becoming this thick, soupy juice called chyme. Brown, really not very pretty. If you've ever thrown up, you've seen chyme before. The The pyloric sphincter at the bottom of the stomach will then slowly squeeze out chyme into our next part of the digestive tract, which is the small intestine. Okay. The stomach has hydrochloric acid in it, and I mentioned that before. It's designed to kill bacteria. So this acid is extremely acidic with a pH of 2, and it actually can burn your skin. But your stomach has a specific adaptation that allows it to kind of hold this acid there. And there is a specific substance called not pepsinogen. There is sodium bicarbonate in your that your body produces that actually prevents the hydrochloric acid from actually eating the lining of your stomach. So your stomach has a pretty cool adaptation in which that it has a protective lining, so that even though we have an extremely acidic substance sitting in the stomach, that acidic substance is not actually going to eat through the stomach lining. So our accessory organs. So again, we've got chyme, which is that thick, soupy liquid. Right here, we've got that chyme, thick, soupy liquid that has been broken down by the stomach, and that chyme is moving into the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. And again, the duodenum is primarily where most of the nutrients are broken down in the digestive system. So protein's the only nutrient broken down in the digestive system. Sugars or carbohydrates are starting to be broken down in the mouth, but the majority of digestion takes place in the duodenum of the small intestine. And how does that digestion take place in the duodenum? Well, it takes place with the help of these three accessory organs: the pancreas, the gall bladder, and the liver. So the liver produces a substance called bile. It's not specifically an enzyme, but it's a substance that can emulsify fat. So it ends up breaking apart fat into these very small droplets that can be broken down easier. So bile is similar to like dish soap. So dish soap is responsible for breaking down food substances and fats like on your plates, on your dinner plates or pots or pans. Bile is a substance that does that for your body. The gallbladder is designed to store any excess bile that is produced by the liver. And so the pancreas ends up producing a variety of pancreatic juices which contain the majority of the digestive enzymes, such as amylase, which breaks down carbohydrates, trypsin, lipase, which breaks down lipids. And there are a whole bunch of other enzymes that end up being produced, and all of this material, the pancreatic juice as well as the bile, gets dumped into the duodenum of the small intestine, where the rest of digestion takes place. On to the small intestine. So the function of the small intestine is chemical digestion. So we're going to finish out digestion in the duodenum of the small intestine. And then we are going to absorb those nutrients, those carbohydrates, those proteins, that fat, all that type of stuff. We're going to go through absorption. So the small intestine is over 6 meters long, which means that it equates to about 20 feet on average. So you have 20 feet of small intestine. The first part of that small intestine, the rest of digestion, chemical digestion is taking place, but the rest of the small intestine is designed to absorb nutrients. And the surface of the small intestine is actually pretty incredible. It's about the size of a tennis court. And we need all that surface area so we can get the maximum absorption of nutrients as possible. And I said before, the small intestine is broken up into 3 sections: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So the duodenum, again, continues digestion. The jejunum and the ileum are designed for absorption of nutrients and absorption of water. So the lining of the small intestine. The small intestine has a specific adaptation that allows it to absorb as many nutrients as possible. So the lining of the small intestine is lined with these structures called villi, and so here we have some villi here, and up top there, so we've got these folds, and then up top we've got these villi, and on the surface of the villi we even have microvilli. So we're trying to increase our surface area so we can have the maximum absorption of nutrients as possible. And then our small intestine is also lined with veins and blood vessels so that we can get those nutrients into the bloodstream and carry those away to other areas of the body that need those nutrients in order to function or carry out other cellular processes. So here is a cross-section of some villi under a microscope, and you can see all the finger-like projections here that are the villi, and then if we were to zoom in closer, there would even be further hair-like structures, microvilli, on the surface of that to increase the absorption of nutrients in the small intestine. So the large intestine, now that we've absorbed as many nutrients as possible, okay, any undigested material gets moved on to the large intestine, also referred to as the colon. And in the colon's only job is to absorb water, okay? The colon is larger. It's called the large intestine because it's larger in diameter than the small intestine. Again, there are three parts of the large intestine: the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon. And there's no digestion going on here, absolutely none. And it's designed to absorb water and minerals. So it can absorb up to 9 liters of water every day from digestive juices and just the undigested material. If not enough water is absorbed by the colon, you end up with diarrhea. If too much water is absorbed by the colon, you end up with constipation. And after all that water has been absorbed, any undigested stuff are your feces or your poop. Really cool is you've got symbiotic bacteria, E. coli, that live in your small intestine. So you've got company. There are these symbiotic bacteria, E. coli, that live in your small intestine, and they're a helpful community of bacteria. They're symbiotic because we gain a benefit from them, and they get a benefit from us. They get housing, essentially. That's their benefit. They get a place to live, and they get a place to obtain food. And we also get benefits because we get some vitamins produced by them. We get vitamin K, which is a necessary factor in blood clotting, and vitamin B. Okay. Downside to having these bacteria, they're the reason why we end up having gas. So a byproduct of bacterial metabolism is they produce methane and hydrogen sulfide, so they're the reasons why we fart. So this is a table of the digestive system and the important enzymes and substances in the digestive system, where they're made, where they're used, and what their function is for. So definitely jot this down. This is important. This is something we'll review in class, and you'll want to remember for test or quiz day. And then last but not least, having completed this video lecture, you should be able to explain the difference between mechanical and chemical digestion, both in the mouth, in the stomach, in the small intestine. If you were to eat an apple, or as you eat an apple, you should be able to identify the parts of the digestive system that the apple would pass through from the beginning to the end, and identify where that apple will be digested. There's specific parts in the digestive tract that apple will be digested. Also be able to identify where specific nutrients are broken down in the digestive system. So where are carbohydrates broken down first? Where are proteins broken down? Where are lipids broken down? And then be able to explain how the small intestine is able to absorb so many nutrients. I hope you found this helpful, and we'll be reviewing this again in class.